In driving, assistance systems and charging is this one, the game changer vehicle. Today we're driving the all-new generation of the BMW iX3 for the very first time, the new generation of the electric X3. At this moment it's still camouflaged on the exterior, but with a recent preview concept we could already see how it looks like more or less in the final version, and we can see from the basic shapes and also how the front here, the double kidney, is integrated. It will look very similar to the vehicle we have already shown to you. Today is more about the driving and more features about the technology. We can give you a better in-depth look what they want to do with this vehicle. This is not only for the electric X3 but also for the new upcoming electric 3 Series and for many other new EVs, because this one here is the Neue Klasse, means new class. At that point in time, from 1962 to 1972, it was like a predecessor vehicle of the upcoming 5 Series, and this signals like a new start for BMW. Why is that? This is not only, about the exterior concept, it's also about the interior and the software architecture. So the battery is of course placed in the lower part of the vehicle, and usually that gives you the problem with new EVs. You have a very stiff middle body, and then the front and the end is kind of like wobbly, and that gives you a strange driving feeling shown with a lot of new EVs. So BMW said, hey, we want to have the same or even better driving experience like we have with our combustion engines from all that experience over the decades in electric vehicles. So what they did here now is use the battery as like stabilizer in the vehicle, but then extend it a little bit, this stabilization, to the rear and the front end to make it as linear from the stiffness, from the rigidity, like a combustion engine vehicle. So they say that they make the riding with this EV then more predictable, like we know from combustion engine cars, plus adding software intelligence to make it actually predictive. So this one here, from all the drivetrain integration, how the brake intervention works, acceleration, everything is 10 times faster with the new so-called Heart of Joy electronic control unit. And that makes actually, like for example, when you make an evasive maneuver, makes it more smooth. So you don't have to go that far out to either side. You make a more like smaller evasion curve, so to speak. And the engineers say or promise that this one then drives even more different than all the EVs we had so far, and even better, especially when you do something, like an evasive maneuver, something that has to be done quick. And now a pedestrian safety test. So at this moment I play that I'm not paying attention and running this pedestrian off, and here automatic evasive maneuver. And you might ask or might wonder, we were staying in the lane. If the car would affect, we exceed the lane and maybe face the oncoming traffic or something, in that case, it would have been an emergency braking. But when the car sees there is a, let's say, more comfortable, better solution than emergency braking, because then maybe someone can, run into your car or something like that. So it always depends, on the situation. Either emergency braking, or for example, when you have the ACC, the cruise control set, then it would have been in emergency braking. But when I drive myself and for some reason not paying attention, then we do this evasive maneuver. And we're really looking forward to how the driving feeling then really conveys to the vehicle, because honestly, a lot of EVs we've been driving, we felt, that feels kind of off. And when you drive a BMW 3 Series, just as a base 320i or something, the base petrol, and you think everything about this car feels right in driving, in the chassis, And I'm looking forward to that exact feeling in an electric BMW. And I'm really looking forward to if this works with this vehicle, which will drive more or less the same here as X3 in an electric way, or also as the future 3 Series and so on. Here, by the way, 21-inch wheels, so rather larger wheels. This will have a base suspension here today, so this is even more interesting. So we are driving the base spec, like an X-Drive 50, so to speak, without any special super suspension. There will be other suspension types later on available, but it's even more interesting how this one drives with a base suspension indeed. As for the battery, there are no communicated kilowatt hours figures yet, but here, as the charging flap, we can say that the charging has increased significantly. About 20 minutes from 10 to 80% state of charge, 400 kilowatt peak, and they promise about 350 kilometers or 220 miles of range in about 10 minutes. And this sounds pretty good. I already saw a charging demonstration earlier, which we were not allowed to film. And this works very well like at holding that peak. Then the charging curve drops a little bit, holds that peak about 200 kilowatt, and then it drops further. But this will allow us like very, very quick charging on the go at the 400 kilowatt charging station. 800 volt technology. And we can expect, of course, even slightly bigger battery. And they say that everything is increased by 30%. So also 30% more range, for example. A realistic range, I would not take from the WLTP figure, not from the EU driving cycle, because that promises 800 kilometers. The EPA figures, like the US figures, say it will be about 6 or 40 kilometers or around 400 miles. And I think that is a realistic figure then for a new iX3. And I think we can work with that kind of range. And the charging flap, by the way, will automatically open. So you either open the door, go there and it's already open, or you have the phone in your pocket as the car key. And then the car knows, wait a minute, you have the car key as the phone here. You move to the charging station, move back again. That's probably when you want to have the charging flap open, and it opens automatically. BMW will also offer a DC wall box with 19 kilowatt peak for use at home, together with vehicle to load, vehicle to grid, so all the different functions. They will also start with a project in Germany in cooperation with E.ON, with the energy provider, where they also introduce this vehicle to grid function, where you can directly buy it as a customer concisely. Behind these aero wheels, by the way, still of course the discs, which you will probably almost never use, because they say now they have a better blending, or almost no blending at all is needed, because 98% of situations will be covered by recuperation when you decelerate the vehicle. So we will hardly never use the real brakes, that they don't collect rust and so on. They sometimes apply the brake pads a little bit to get rid of like superficial rust or something like that. But in most situations it will be recuperation, but without you noticing it. So using the brake pedal, they will optimize it, that you will always have the recuperation without noticing. Also a very interesting concept. And I said that all the brake interventions, drive system and so on, 10 times faster. About the assistance systems, they will be 20 times faster than before. So there's also another step as for the semi-autonomous driving, level 2 features and so on. BMW meanwhile also offers level 3 features at the limited speed for certain vehicles. So much more to expect also as for assistance systems. And here now, before we start driving, in-depth cockpit perspective. First of all, here a new form of steering wheel. You can grip in there. I'll also tell you more about it while driving. So this has a very cool grip to it indeed. So good for sporty driving. Classic stalk columns behind it. On the steering wheel, and these buttons here on the left, for example, here it shows when it detects a parking spot and automated parking. I was not a friend of it yet, because at the end of the day, in most situations, I would say I'm quicker myself in parking in. But maybe this car can convince me to be lazy. Let's see about that. So this is like a parallel parking situation, and I have here this hotkey on the steering wheel. I can just press here. Start reverse parking, okay, and I don't even have to look at the screen. Here's like an additional visualization, but you see the only thing I did was hitting 2 buttons at the steering wheel. And you see it works relatively quick, and if you're not trained in parallel parking, I think you couldn't do it quicker. I mean, maybe like, yeah, Leah's already said she will only use this function and she will never park herself again. This was very accurate, and the gap here it's quite tight, so there's not much space in the front, and the same way you can actually also park out again, which we can actually also do. Start leaving space, okay. There we go. This is really tight. This is really tight, and pretty much effortless. One more time, maybe. Yeah, one more time. And it's really relaxed, So there we go. I can take over and get out. And of course, this is like the European situation. Let's also test the US situation, more with the parking boxes. And here you can also switch between the individual parking spots here in the infotainment system. Maybe go for this one or this one. And I might also think all these cars are parking forward, so I select forward parking and press start. You can also control it here in the infotainment, depending on what you like better. Or here when you have like a certain choice, for example. And maybe forward parking makes more sense because you want to access the trunk for luggage and so on. Then also this is possible. And it's in a way scary. It's so accurate actually. And the car is not afraid of damaging itself, you know, because the car usually knows what it's doing exactly. But here, especially when you have like a long hood and so on, maybe you're not sure 100%, but the car is sure 100% and does this parking also in a quite flawless way. You have more buttons. They give some kind of feedback. Here's, for example, for the volume, but it's not that it would be like a real button, you know what I mean? So it's like one button field, and then you have this artificial feedback, so to speak. Here you can slide up and down, but you can also press lower and upper at least. So that's to me a little bit more likable. So we have this central infotainment system right here. Climate unit is integrated. Sadly, no physical climate knob, but it's easy to hit relatively. It's also like in the freestanding, and also the way here from the steering wheel to the climate unit is relatively short. For steering wheel heating and seat heating is right here, also with these clicks, and that's also improved. You have the fan speed right here, so, and this stays in this layer and you can still see the map, so you don't have to go into the separate climate menu for that, so that's not needed. And I think that's a step forward. Then the map here, you can see there's more or better CPU power behind it, and it's also actually quite quick. And you can have like these individual layers above that, like for weather, or here's some driving mode selections. And on the left side, I can soon show you that. Here, deactivating the speed beep is always then here on the left side, a hotkey in the infotainment system. And then there comes this integration of the so-called Panoramic Vision. We have here, for example, you can see this additional layer in the top. And the key here is that this lower part of the windshield is darkened out. And then there's a monitor, basically in the very far area here. And this is the mirroring of this monitor. It's pretty interesting. And we can also individualize everything. For example, here in the sport mode, you can see it not only changes in the infotainment, but also then in this panoramic vision. Here, for example, with these red accentuations. On the left side, we have speed and range and percentage of the battery. Then here in this case, in the sport mode, we have some power figures and so on. And of course, if I go back to other modes, it will change accordingly to that. And we can also individualize here the panoramic vision. To go here, configure, and then you can see you have individual gadgets. You can also all delete them. And then you can pick, I want weather there, time, connection, a BMW M logo. But you can also individualize like which exact position, like for example, weather here or the time there. And then it's also mirrored there in the front. I wouldn't do that while driving because that can be distracting. But the thing is that you set up it once with your user account, and then it's also saved together with your user account. So one more time in the close-up, how I put these individual tiles in there, and then you have your additional layer in the cockpit. And this again from the driver's perspective, steering wheel and then the infotainment, and then you have this additional layer there. You will then also have an additional head-up display, which will be even further away. And the advantage of this system is that you have already the classic instruments as the panoramic vision, more individualization, and also that it's more in the far away focus. That is a good thing. What comes handy, for example, here next to the normal view, then you can have your GPS map guidance, the BMW internal guidance, here, for example, in the middle part. And you can also switch through these things here at the steering wheel. And then you can control this middle menu from the steering wheel. For example, the trip meter. You can also, here have this dynamic view, sport mode. Woo! So that was about 30 to about 90 kilometers an hour, something like that. Pretty quick, definitely. One electric motor in the front, one electric motor in the rear, as we also know it from other EVs. And I mean, this will be like a rare situation where you really floor it all the way out. More situations will be that you maybe switch a little bit between accelerating and decelerating. And this is the particularly interesting thing about this one here. So when you slightly on the brake, it feels really linear. But even if you're a little bit hard on the brake, that feeling doesn't stop. And even if you've seen the speed there, I was pretty strong on the brake already, but there was still the recuperation. As I said earlier, 98% of the situations will be covered by recuperation and not by the friction brake. And this is a very interesting thing, you know, because you don't really feel it. And we can even test that further. For example, we can go to the personal mode. That was initially in the sport mode, best boost. And if we go to the, there we go, configure the personal mode, of course, maybe don't do that while driving next time. So here in the driving experience setup, there we go. And then we can, for example, set a high recuperation. When I let go of the throttle, there's a strong recuperation. And then there's no special feeling that, this is just a recuperation. But even more interesting is when I use the recuperation and then hit the brake, it's still a linear deceleration feeling and you don't feel any transitions between anything. That's pretty cool. And this is also the thing about this vehicle in general. It feels smooth in every aspect, like when you decelerate, when you accelerate, but also when you go left and right. And that's very interesting because it's maybe like a feeling of a combustion engine which is tuned on a sportier way, that you just have like a board on the road that is moving. And this is something that I explained to you earlier, that we have this very stiff chassis with the battery, but it's also extended to the front and the rear. And we have it sometimes that we drive the new electric vehicles and they feel a little bit off. They don't present a unity in driving. That's always what we praise about the vehicle when it feels really good in driving, like a 3 Series, for example. You just take the 2-liter 4-cylinder and you just drive it and say, that fits to each other. You know, everything feels right from the chassis. And it's really hardly achieved in the electric vehicles. And here the thing is then, when I steer it also left and right, this is still a base suspension and the car doesn't shake up much to the left or the right. At the same time, it's also not that uncomfortable. And now even more important, what you cannot see so far, Leah is sitting behind me actually. And there she is. And yeah, we've been talking earlier, and usually, for example, we were shuttled to this event in the iX and in sitting in the rear, and we thought like, maybe not the most pleasant experience when the driver is driving sporty. But I've been doing like some acceleration and doing left-right maneuvers and so on, and especially when you sit in the rear, it's not that good. Maybe talk to your kids, then you know what I mean. But Leah actually looks fine. She's smiling and she feels all right. And you have this combination of a lot of weight, electric vehicle, strong acceleration, a lot of G-force being applied. At the same time, you also feel well as a driver, passenger, and even in the rear. And that is rarely achieved. You know, that's the thing that is most astonishing to me here, also in the roundabout, left and right. And it almost feels like the steering is off because the car stays so upright. And you know, we have been covering a lot of vehicles with special suspension technologies like special anti-tilt bars, active suspension where you have hydraulic control of each individual wheel, only to achieve that the car is always remaining upright. And the special thing about driving this one here is the car feels remaining upright and controlled and stable with the base suspension. There is, there's like a little bit in addition to this standard suspension. So we have like a, how would you say, hydraulic cushion?
Hydraulic rebounds.
Hydraulic rebound. Yeah, Steven is a test engineer sitting behind me. He has to sit behind me, next to me. For Leah's behind me and Steven is next to me for legal reasons, because this is like an official test vehicle here. So we have a hydraulic rebound. This is maybe making this suspension so special. So that's a pretty cool feeling for only a base suspension. And now I understand why BMW had no worries to present us base suspension vehicles here, because usually when manufacturers invite us to these driving occasions, they put full spec vehicles, like with the most sophisticated suspension technology there is available and so on, because they want to show off what's possible. But here, actually, a lot is possible already with the base suspension. To me, this is a pretty cool thing. Steering itself, we can set dynamic or comfort here, and this is something I've been giving from you also back to BMW as a feedback. We have wished for, let's say, like a normal comfort mode where we can set a dynamic steering, because sometimes people say, I like the sport mode because of the steering, but I don't want to have the engine revving all the time, especially also when you talk about combustion engines. And this is what we have been wishing for, that we can individualize the steering mode and the rest, like drivetrain and suspension also when you have adaptive suspension and so on. That's possible here. However, they also went a step further, that in the dynamic mode, I feel more what's going on the road, maybe like also vibrations and so on. And it's also a little bit firmer, but not too much. In the comfort mode, it's a little bit lighter, but I would say that the difference between light and firm is not as big as we have before between comfort and sport mode. But here you are still a little bit more disconnected from the car. So this is basically the Leah setting. She prefers like more disconnected feeling from the car and more comfortable feeling. And dynamic is the Thomas setting, where I say I want to feel the car, I want to feel what's going on the road and so on. And I still seek this stronger connection to the vehicle, So that's an interesting new approach to that. I also like these new, grip holes here in the steering that makes you, you can hold on tighter to the steering wheel actually to control it. Of course, some will still drive this way, I cannot recommend it. So this actually makes you having this 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock grip, which I recommend anyways, So, but this definitely helps doing that. I mean, we discussed about the UX part and in the interior part. We can discuss about that separately maybe, but in driving, you tend to rather look at the head-up display with the speed and so on. Sometimes you look there maybe in the middle part. You have this 3-layer approach in here. What I can say is, again, at some point it's distracting to have more information because there's more things you can look at. On the good side is that this middle layer, you don't have this very close focus, and also if you think about like bifocal glasses and so on, this is more far away from you, and already in the more like in the far focus area. So that is helping, and I think it's maybe then also a matter of getting used to. Speed bump, by the way, here, consider we have 21-inch wheels here, which is not the best for a speed bump. It helps you in sporty driving, but let's maybe drive over it when we're not too slow. That's actually pretty cool. So also how, I'm not sure if you can actually see it on camera. Of course, when you go down such a hump, the car is always getting off balance in a way, but we have another one, and just look at it, like how quickly the car gets into the balance again. So we have basically the effect of a stiff suspension.
Let's try it faster.
Yeah, faster.
Much faster.
Okay, when the engine says that. Yeah, here you can see it, like it's directly straight again. We can also hop off it. And it's a motocross technique, like when you're driving off a table or something, you lift the front wheel or something. That's also pretty cool. Yeah, and now we're getting to an area where you can drive more rural traffic, a little bit more like left and right and so on. But I think the main takeaway is already that this more connected feeling works, and that the car feels, in a way, less EV, but on the other hand, more EV. And what do I mean by that? So it feels less EV in the sense of that you don't have this disconnected chassis feeling, what we have with some electric vehicles. But it feels more EV in the sense of that that there's no transition between accelerating, braking, deceleration, acceleration, vertical, lateral, everything. All the movements are, you can, as you like, use a pen and draw the lines somewhere, and this makes it feel more EV and less combustion engine. And it's hard to say what is better or worse in that respect, because that's a matter of preference. It feels in a way more perfect, let's take it that way. Some might even prefer imperfect when we talk about like driving a naturally aspirated V8. It's not a perfect acceleration, but it's good because it's imperfect, you know what I mean? Because of this kind of delay in the acceleration. But this one here, yeah, to me the most astonishing feature is that we have 21-inch wheels in the base suspension, and it's both comfortable and sporty at the same time. So that I'm actually pretty impressed with. Gotta say, I still gotta get used to all the additional UX features. I would have wished that things got easier, but that's not necessarily the case. But maybe we'll learn more about that over time. So one more time, we switch to the sport mode and show you some more dynamic cornering. Also talking about this effortless in driving. And here I'm taking these corners here with maximum speed that is allowed, and it feels like I could drive double the speed, honestly. There's no effort in it, actually. And look at, I don't have to do much on the steering, and this feels like on rails, honestly. So, I mean, we really went through that with 70 kilometers an hour, so maximum that was allowed. I literally felt like I could have done like, I don't know, 120 or something like that. And even more astonishing is the Leah meter behind me, because she's smiling all the time. Steven is also giving thumbs up. Accelerating out of the corner, also incredible. And I mean, there are of course also always cars that are faster and whatever, you know, and supercars. But here you have a, let's say, standard compact or mid-size, depending on the country definition, SUV. And it's still driving like a sports car on rails. And see here, I hardly do anything on the throttle. I hardly do anything on the steering wheel. At the same time, I have great speed. And Leah is smiling. I mean, usually when we drive like so sporty, and especially with SUVs or especially with electric vehicles, and even worse, the combination SUV plus electric vehicle with that weight and with this higher building form, Leah at some point would say like, Thomas, that's enough, stop. And I mean, she's sitting behind me at the rear seats. And again, rear seats are always worse for driving, and rear seats are better for the driver. Does the car have shoulder massage? Now it has, you know. That would maybe something. So yeah. So if you want us to tell the engineers something what you have as a feedback for BMW, then feel free to do so as in the comments. Yeah, I mean, one of the feedbacks that worked was the individualized driving mode with the individual steering setting, for example. And to me, the coolest thing is really, no matter what we do, if we drive straight, if we go really sporty in the corners, but also over speed humps in the city, it's 21-inch wheels. That was usually a rough feeling, plus the base suspension, and it feels like it would be like this super sophisticated hydraulic suspension and so on, because this combination of stiffness of the vehicle and these predictive electric systems kind of even out that. And even if I do some slalom here, yeah, it feels just like on rails. And that's again bringing back to this driving conclusion thing, that it's more perfect in driving, definitely more perfect than the 3 Series is. It still has fun in its own way. So driving a 3 Series will still be fun in the classic combustion engine way. And this is like a new kind of fun. And I wouldn't necessarily say that one is better than the other. It's personal preference, but both have like a distinctive feeling to it, indeed. So that's the most astonishing feeling to it. And some things that were criticized and, you know, rightful criticized before with EV driving are kind of diminished. Now about more assistance systems. Special thing here introduced with this new vehicle will be, we're driving 20 kilometers an hour at the moment. In the city, we can activate an automatic lane changing here. So this is like city driving because of these low speeds. And this wasn't possible before. And also there's a car in front of us, but also close one behind us. So when I go back into that small gap again, before that wasn't possible because the car was thinking, maybe the gap isn't large enough. But now even smaller gaps are actually possible. And then if we imagine a motorway situation here, for example, at 80 kilometers an hour, so like 50 miles an hour. So you remember from our recent 5 Series reviews that we have the possibility here to look into the mirror to induce lane changing. But here there's a new feature, and this is like working together with what you do yourself and with the assistance systems. So I can either just use the turning indicator like I did with this city lane change, but I can now also not use the indicator Very important for BMW customers. You know, there's like this urban myth out there that BMW customers would never use their turning indicator. Especially non-BMW customers say that. But hey, you really don't need it anymore in this case, because now you can actually do the following. You can look to the mirror and just, you know, steer a little bit, and then there's automatically the indicator. Once again, left mirror plus a little bit on the steering wheel here, and the indicator is activated, and the rest of the lane change is also being done automatically. And I was doing it, you know, visibly actually, but it even works when I just do it slightly. There we go. See here, just a small grip on the steering wheel, looking to the mirror, and then I can save myself from turning the indicator myself. Yeah, do you like that feature? That's always working here with the real automatic one. When I'm, for example, here I'm driving a little bit faster than the car in front of us, and then, or want to drive faster, and then here suggestion is done just by looking into the mirror, also hands-free. It's level 2+, so I'm still responsible. Now, for example, another suggestion, I look to the right mirror, and there we go, back again. And then we have another all-new feature, and this is the so-called cooperative braking. And that means usually when I hit the brake, the assistance system is cancelled. But here, for example, if I want to adjust something myself slightly or so, I can be slightly on the brake, and the assistance system is now picking up again. So here I'm slightly on the brake, I lift the brake, and then the assistance system is active again. It's not cancelled. At all times you can just press the button here on the left on the steering wheel and cancel it yourself. So that's the possibility. Or you can also, when you just really quickly hit the brake like this, it's not pleasant for the passenger, of course, but by that you could also still cancel it, or you press it not that firm, but 3 times, like blub, blub, blub. This is another way to cancel it. Or then again, as I said here, just hit the left thumb on the steering wheel. And by the way, you can also deactivate this function completely. If you don't like the function, like this cooperative braking, can also be deactivated in the menu, and it stays off then also at the next restart. But the sense of that is that you don't have the world of assisted driving and driving yourself, but that these two worlds are basically blending. So what we have been complaining sometimes, not necessarily with BMWs, but also with other manufacturers, that sometimes the adaptive cruise control is not smooth enough, especially in traffic situations when you have stop and go, car starts driving, stops again, and so on. And they have worked on this one here now. So now we're in this stop and go situation, going forward, stopping again. And sometimes Leah told me, like, can you get rid of the ACC and drive yourself, because that's smoother. But here now, it's very smooth transitions. And we did some tests earlier, so for example, when I close my eyes, that the car cannot really tell like when the car is exactly stopping. So the sense of this whole improvement is to make it smoother, both in the deceleration and also in the acceleration process. And that's good for the driver and also for the passengers, because here we can hardly feel the transition. And usually that's done, you know, just like by the human feeling in your pedal, in the foot. And here you can really say, like, hey, I can relax, especially in a traffic situation, and it's really like slightly starting again, and also slightly stopping again. And Leah nods from the rear, says, yeah, that's definitely improved. Very rarely we say that, but this is indeed a game changer. We saw it in the driving experience. It drives like no other EV. Assistance systems are extremely elaborated and work very smooth and seamless. The user interface, I think it's good to have like a little bit far focused on some of the functions. I'm not entirely convinced that we need this overload in 3 layers. You know what I mean? We need Leah, but not more layers. Yeah. So as I said, driving extremely good, charging also extremely promising, assistance systems flawless and go even further beyond. User interface, we have to see about that. That is my conclusion for today, but the overall package, what they deliver, and especially for the electric segment, is indeed a game changer. What do you think? Tell me in the comments, and now join us for more reviews.